And I would like also to introduce to you Emily Mayo, the Executive Director of Yale International Relations Association, and give her a couple of words for the beginning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and especially to our three incredible speakers. I personally have always dreamed of a career in international relations, and so I'm so excited to hear their insights today. Basically, I just want to give thanks, a huge deserved thanks to Alexei, who's done an incredible job organizing this event. The Yale International Relations Association's executive director team works to plan all of our events focused on international relations education and also just bringing more awareness of international relations to the Yale community and beyond. So I'll pass it back off to Alexei, but thank you so much for all of your hard work. And thank you everyone for coming today.
Yeah, a few words about Yale International Relations Organization, or just YIRA. Founded in 1969, YIRA is the largest undergraduate student organization at Yale. We aim to foster conversation about international relations on campus and beyond through conferences, classes, travel, publications, and speaker events like this one. With members hailing from more than 30 countries and pursuing all courses of study, YIRA hopes to create an inclusive education space for students so that they can best apply their passion for international relations and give back to the world. I would like to also thank the Alexander Hamilton Society Buckley Program, International Students Organization, and Office of Career Strategy for their support in sharing information about this event. Now let me introduce our honorable speakers. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Vladyslav Rashkovan. Mr. Rashkovan is a senior financial executive with more than 20 years of global experience in international organizations, central banking, and international commercial banking. As an alternate executive director of the IMF and a member of the IMF executive board, Mr. Rashkovan negotiates with high-level European officials from 16 countries, including Eastern and Central Europe, countries of Benelux and Israel. Previously, Mr. Rashkovan led major Ukrainian financial firms and banks, such as Unicredit Bank and SD Capital. He also served as the deputy governor of the National Bank of Ukraine. Under this position, Mr. Rashkovan successfully brokered numerous deals with major international organizations, such as IMF, World Bank, and USAID. Please welcome also our second speaker, Mrs. Nataliya Bugayova. Mrs. Bugayova is Director of Intelligence at Tecsonomy, a new tech-enabled intelligence firm that maps, and is also a non-resident National Security Fellow at ISW, which is Institute for the Study of War. Previously, Mrs. Bugayova led ISW's Russia Research Program, analyzing Russia's strategy and its military information campaigns all around the world. Prior to ISW, Nataliya served as the CEO of Kyiv Post, the Ukrainian largest English language publication, and as the Chief of Staff and advisor to former Ukrainian Economy Minister. And lastly, please welcome Ambassador Harry K. Thomas Jr. Ambassador Thomas is a senior fellow at Yale's University's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs and a senior strategic engagement leader at Special Operations Command. He served as the US ambassador to Zimbabwe, the Philippines, and Bangladesh. He retired in March 2018 with the rank of career minister after more than 3 decades in foreign service. Ambassador Thomas also served as the executive secretary and special assistant to Secretary Rice, as Director General of the Foreign Service, Director for South Asia at the National Security Council, and Director of the Operations Center. A little bit words about the structure of our today's meeting. So first, every speaker will have 15 minutes to introduce their field of international relations. They will cover their day-to-day tasks and what skills are necessary to excel in their fields, or the best ways to enter their discipline and how to progress through the career ladder once you're there, and how their field differs from other spheres of international relations. Next, we will have 3 breakout rooms with speaker in each breakout room, and the participants will be able to freely join any breakout room they want and ask whatever questions they desire to ask. We hope to foster inclusive conversations so that so the participants can ask personalized questions and have intimate discussion. without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Vladyslav Rashkovan, our first speaker, to the.
Alexei, thank you. Thanks Emily for the introduction. Alexei, thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to speak to you. I already had a chance to speak to Yale students, but now it's even more interesting for me because I know Alexei still when he was only applying to university, and so now I see him already as a developing student and a well recognized student in Yale. And it's also a pleasure to see Nataliya, who is a good friend of mine for a long time. And it's apparently we met here, we didn't discuss, so we just found out a few days ago. And I also hope that I will become friends with Ambassador Thomas one day as well. Thanks for coming. And I personally think we should have started with Ambassador Thomas because he is the most, experienced and from the perspective of international relations. Because I'm Ukrainian, I'm Vlad Rashkovan, I'm 43, as Alexei just said. I started my career like 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, first as academician, researcher, consultant in banking, and I studied abroad, returned to Ukraine, went for PhD, and my focus of interest was how to make bank mergers efficient. So I'm really absolutely and not international relations topic was but partially as a part of my PhD research, partially due to my study in Italy. In 2006 I was invited by Unicredit Group to work and to lead first to work, later to lead several big transformation projects, merger projects in Central Eastern Europe. And I used to work in the next 8 years in Kiev, Milan, Munich, Vienna, Warsaw, and dealing with many strategy and integration projects and dealing with a lot of the multicultural and international environment. And in 2010, I became the Chief Financial Officer of Unicredit in Ukraine. And during the next years, I was recognized as a top 5 CFOs, Chief Financial Officers in Ukraine in all industries. And as you might know, in 2014 in Ukraine, there was a revolution of dignity, and Nataliya at that time also returned to Ukraine, to join the Ministry of Economy. I was invited at that time to the central bank. I was 37 when I became the deputy governor of the central bank, responsible for running banking reforms and turnaround transformation of central bank. And apparently, international organizations like IMF, World Bank consider those reforms and those efforts as the most efficient post-revolutionary reforms in Ukraine. And in 2017, I joined the IMF. And during the last 4 years, I served, as Alexei said, as a member of the IMF executive board, representing 16 mostly European countries. And what is the IMF? I'm sure you know that IMF is a multilateral financial institution born after the Second World War. Formally, we are the daughter of United Nations, but factually we are very independent. 190 countries are members of the IMF, which makes us, after the United Nations, the second biggest international organization in the world. And believe me, we have a lot of international relations. And the IMF key mandate is to help the world, both to avoid global financial crisis and also help countries to deal with macroeconomic, trade, payment, or financial crises. And for sure, we focus not only on our core mandate, but what we name also emerging topics, which is, the inequality, automation, digitalization, gender gaps, or recently working on climate issues. How do we do it? There are 3 key instruments which the IMF is using already for decades. The first, what we name is surveillance. IMF annually sends the missions to most of the countries in the world, including the most advanced ones, but also to low-income countries and fragile countries to perform the macroeconomic surveillance and surveillance of the financial sectors. We analyze the local and regional economic developments and also provide IMF advice to the authorities, like in Japan, US, UK, but also to Sudan, Bolivia, or Jordan. So every country in the world, according to this article of associations of the fund which they have signed, has to accept the IMF missions, the surveillance missions, and also has to respect the advice which the fund gives to to those countries. During the last 12 months, as you understand, due to pandemics, most of these missions have been organized online. The second key product or function of the IMF is lending. For the countries which need financial support during the crisis, the IMF develops specific programs which from one side provide necessary funding, but from another side we support the government, the authorities with development of policies needed to overcome the crisis. We have several key instruments which are tailor-made somehow this year. There are about 35 countries totally which work with a fund in respect of the programs. During the last pretty exceptional year, 85 countries applied to the fund for support, and the fund supported them with $107 billion programs. On top of that, we also supported 29 countries with some kind of debt relief. And in general, our total lending capacity of the fund is around $1 trillion, just to give you an idea about the balance sheet of the bank. And last but not the least, we work on the capacity development. So we try to build the institutional capacity of the government institutions in different countries. And our usual key partners in those countries are central banks and ministries of finance, but sometimes we go beyond these two major institutions. During last pandemic year, we managed to organize more than 2,400 missions to strengthen our partners. Around 400 online courses were provided to about 20,000 government officials throughout the world in all the geographies. Almost 190 countries were participating in this kind of technical advisory. And we do both virtually, physically, via missions, or via our 17 regional capacity development centers. And totally we spend for this about $300 million per year, which is around 30% of our annual budget. This is what we do. Now, I was asked by Alexei to tell you about my a daily routine. Probably it would be difficult to do like a daily because days are really different. But a weekly, and I just look at my calendar for the last week, so for this week, which is not finished yet. I was 2 minutes late because I was talking with a Georgian team. Georgia as a country, not as a state in US. The team on some program topics. But my week and tomorrow is still a day. So during this week, and I just made a list for me. I spoke with 3 governors of the central banks in Armenia, Georgia, and Ukraine, and also the ministers of finance there, and discussing the program issues. In parallel, like just now, I had also talks with many calls with mission chiefs for those countries. We had several very interesting board meetings this week, which I was participating in. One was on extension of G20 debt service suspension initiative for the low-income countries. We also were working on some kind of extension of limits for our funding lending facilities for countries. We discussed very interesting event. I was writing about this also on Facebook on the issuance of the so-named special drawing rights, or SDR, which is some kind of currency for the fund. And we are discussing now about $615 billion issuance of the fund money, which is a pretty historic event. Will be a little bit later this year because it will be the 3rd time after the birth of the fund when it happens, and this is by far the biggest issuance. In terms of the countries, during this week we discussed Somalia, Pakistan, Sudan. In the next day there will be also discussion of Madagascar and South Sudan, and for which I was preparing, reading a lot of the materials, analytical materials, memos, etc. We are discussing tomorrow the macroeconomic development of low-income countries, which is a very a horizontal view on the many countries. And today we've just finished 4 hours discussion on World Economic Outlook, the IMF flagship report, which is going to be published in less than 2 weeks. And believe me, like in 2 weeks, you will see that all information agencies in the world will quote something from this report. Tomorrow, I also have a meeting with staff on fintech developments, and on top of that, I was participating in several conferences, spoke, with some startup founders who asked my like a non-paid advice. I discussed a book which I'm writing with my friend, gave a lecture on Monday to the London School of Economics, and today speak with you. I mean, it's not a busy week. I mean, normal week could be better, So, and how to get to the fund? Actually, you have two ways. You can be like myself as a mid-career professional, which did something good in the country, and later you join the fund as a specialist who can disseminate some of the knowledge to other countries, or which is more close to your age. There is a program so named like a Young Economist program. It's a very popular, highly competitive program. Fund permanently looking for a graduate or a young PhD students from different countries of the world who want to have some kind of influence on the global stage and who can bring the latest thoughts on economic issues, but I mean to address the global economic challenges. So if you want to have more international economic relations, I would definitely advise you to go for this program, to try this, and how to do it, we will discuss in the breakout rooms. Come to discuss with me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your brief introduction of the IMF and its structure, how it functions, and your daily tasks. And thank you for introducing the Young Economist program. I'm sure a lot of YILAs will definitely apply to that. Now I would like to invite Mrs. Bugayova to the floor.
Thank you, Alexei and Emily. Thanks for organizing, and greetings to everyone on the call. It's great to see you, Vlad, and a pleasure, Ambassador. I'll also speak briefly about my experience in the field in the context of both the Institute for the Study of War, where I remain a fellow, as well as the Tecsonomy, the new firm that we're currently building. I'll also talk about briefly where I think the field is headed and what skills the aspiring professionals will require. And then finally also flag, as Vlad did, a couple of concrete opportunities in both organizations. So research program at the Institute for the Study of War. ISW is a national security think tank that applies methods of intelligence from openly available data to monitor important national security issues. On Rush team, we were tracking Russia's military activity around the world, information campaigns, and other types of activity in places including former Soviet Union, Africa, Syria, and beyond. The products that the output of the work would essentially be intelligence reports that would come out weekly by weekly, large foundational reports discussing strategic level view from the Kremlin and the evolution of their doctrines, as well as the adaptations of their hybrid methods. I think the interesting thing about ISW is that it does provide a 360-degree view on any particular problem set. And as a person who worked in Russia, I could go to our Syria team and ask them what they're observing in their daily collection on problem sets that relate to Russia and Syria, and so on and so forth. I think also interesting that ISW is both technologically enabled and language enabled. A lot of interns and analysts know more than one language, and the organization uses the new tools that enable intelligence from openly available data. I think the field, this is an exciting and emergent field of analysis of openly available information that I'll speak to more broadly further today. I think secondly, interesting point about day-to-day activity at ISW is it's focused primarily on two vectors. One is building the ground picture, right? It's a granular day-to-day collection, looking at what various actors, whether it's the Kremlin or terrorist organizations, are doing in the world. And then also looking at the strategic level and the thinking that those actors are expressing and kind of calibrating between the two to build your ground assessment. Tecsonomy, the firm that I transitioned to last year, is a new technology-enabled intelligence company. Our focus, well, we actually started as a supply chain analysis firm, and presently we're focused on mapping and monitoring complex ecosystems that live at the nexus of national security, technology, and financial markets, because we fundamentally believe that those problem sets are converging and one no longer has a luxury of just focusing on one angle. So for example, we use also methods of analysis from openly available data to map problem sets like advanced semiconductor ecosystem or China's engagement in biotechnology that are and types like this. My role is Director of Intelligence. I direct the research program, but also actually thinking about the technology that could empower analysts. One of our long-term visions is to actually build out an analytical toolkit that would make it much easier for analysts to, and professionals in various fields, but in particular those looking at the global problem sets, to collect, analyze, process, map and monitor data and deliver it in a dynamic way to help decision makers make decisions faster. That's in a nutshell the I think the briefly two organizations that I'm engaged in. I think in terms of where the field is headed, we actually have quite a bit of discussion going in my at Tecsonomy about the future of the field. And I think there are two processes that, or trends in motion, that I think are at conflict with each other that are really important to watch, that will define the field. I think on one side, you have convergence of various aspects, like international relations become an increasingly more interdisciplinary field. You have to understand not just specific regions, but you also have to understand the financial markets. You have to understand technology to grasp the complexity. On the other side, I think with the proliferation of the data and anyone's ability to access it, the premium on analysis actually grows. So on the other side, you actually have to be adept on any particular given problem set more so than before, in my assessment. And I think those are two conflicting processes with the tension amount to that will define the field. And I think the skills, if we talk about the skills for the future IA professionals, first, I think it's still important to have a particular region that you are expert in the beginning, picking one. I could tell you that someone who comes from Ukraine and was there during the 2014 events and prior, it does help tremendously to have had that on the ground experience in Ukraine and also the broadly former Soviet Union. At the same time, I also think that future IA professionals should also aspire to learn skills and expertise in scientific area. For example, we're looking presently at biotechnology, and I'm learning a whole lot about genomics, something I did not expect I would be. So if you have opportunity to actually develop scientific knowledge or technological knowledge, I highly recommend it, because I think a lot of the insight will come at the nexus of the two. Now, the second skill set, I think you can't necessarily learn it all. So start with something, start with a specialization, whatever that actually is, but then try to build your 360 view through community of other experts. I think one of the most important skills going forward will be ability to evaluate sources critically. Start building your source list and almost source universes now. And that includes experts in various fields, and having almost a community of experts on every subject that you are not working on, but that is important to your field. So I think that's actually very critical. And I think finally, in terms of skills, I think it's important to get on the tech-enabled analyst professional train sooner rather than later. What I mean by that is the insight that you will deliver will also come from your ability to understand material sourcing, conceptualize it, synthesize it, present it at scale, fast, in the way that decision makers can understand. There are a lot of tools, technological tools, that are emerging in this field, including, for example, graph-powered knowledge bases that I think would help a lot of professionals capture their knowledge, capture their insight faster, and deliver it. So I would highly recommend thinking about and taking active notes on what tools are available for both the analysis and collection and presentation of data, and learning some Python or language of your choosing. And I will wrap it up also by flagging a couple of opportunities that I think concretely that exist in both organizations. So first, the Institute for the Study of War has, I think, one of the best national security intelligence internships in the US, and ISW takes this internship program very seriously, and it really empowers individuals to do analysis in their first semester and interact with data and learn interesting tech tools. There's also a war studies program that ISW runs for college students every summer, supported by the Hertag Foundation, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. Both are wonderful opportunities, and a lot of ISW alumni went to work in the fields of national security, foreign relations, and others. At Tecsonomy, as we're building out our firm, we're a very young company, but we're also launching the internship program. So if you're interested at analyzing problem sets that are at the nexus of geopolitics, national security, technology, finance, please stay in touch, and I would be more than happy to talk to you more about this in the breakout session.
Thank you so much for the introduction of the international relations analyst field and talking about the Institute for the Study of War and the Tecsonomy. I'm sure that a lot of our participants found your future projections and advice extremely valuable. And one word about ISW internship is that I talked with some people that have previously interned in it, and they all have given incredibly positive reviews of it. And I know that a lot of people after this internship went to work at leading international security analysis firms. So I would definitely encourage you to apply to ISW internship. And now I would like to welcome Ambassador Thomas to introduce to us the field of diplomacy.
Thank you so much. And I've learned a lot listening to Vlad and Nataliya. So it's been a lesson. I was an American Foreign Service officer for 34 years. I think all of the foreign services pretty much hire people the same way. American Foreign Services through a standardized exam. Some organizations do it through resumes. But believe it or not, to be an American Foreign Service officer, all you have to do is be 21 and an American citizen and pass the exam. You do not have to be a college graduate. You do not. Now, most people are, but you do not have to be. And we have plenty of people who've done that. Now, the key, I think, for any foreign service and any professional organization is the ability to communicate. Verbal and drafting, which we call drafting in the foreign service, writing skills are critical, but also language skills. I joined the Foreign Service without any languages. They taught me Spanish, Hindi, Bengali, some Tagalog. I studied those languages for over a year, and you learn more once you live in a country. You cannot tell the American people or the American administration what is going on in a country where you don't speak the language. It's just impossible. And you're not going to know everything about that country as a foreigner, even if you do speak the language and get to understand the culture. We spend 2 to 3 years in a country. That's impossible. Saying in America, you're in New Haven. If you go to Salt Lake City, it's still America, but it's a very different part of America, and you have to learn that. When you join our foreign service, which is among the largest in the world, it's still relatively small compared to our defense establishment. We, unlike other foreign services, the consular portion, which are the people who do visas, your student visas or your J visas or immigration, we all do that for 2 years. Some foreign services break it out, but the great thing about that is you really learn to speak the language of the country. You learn the issues because people can apply for visas for all kinds of reasons. When the economy is up, down, because they want to adopt children, all of these things. So we all do 2 years of that. Believe it or not, foreigners know much more about visas than Americans. It's not a major issue in American embassies. But for immigrants, it is a major issue, or students. And after that, you go out into one of your specialties: political officers, economic, management, public diplomacy, or consular, people who do the visas. I was a political officer, which I love, but we have economic, management. A lot of the young folk today are trying to enter public diplomacy because it's very important. We are commissioned officers. Our ranks equate to military ranks in the American Foreign Service, and we have an up or out system. If you have 5 years to be tenured to keep your job, if you make it to the equivalent of colonel, full colonel, then you can apply for the senior ranks. That means applying for the equivalent of being general. Once you become a general, you can apply to be an ambassador. We have 2 types of ambassadors. All ambassadors are appointed by the president, but we have political ambassadors. People usually are friends of the president or wealthy donors, some excellent, some total disasters. And we have career officers, which I was one of. Not all of us are great either. Sometimes we have some doozies, but most of the ambassadors come from the career ranks. I had the privilege of sitting on the Deputy Secretary's Committee that chose ambassadors for 4 years when I was Executive Secretary and Director General. It can be an arcane system, but we're looking for people who have the ability to lead. And it's important because if you look at the challenges we face in the world today, human trafficking, COVID will not be the last pandemic, PEPFAR, climate change, skirmishes throughout. President Biden's first foreign policy challenge in Africa is East Africa, Ethiopia. What are we going to do there with the Nile, South Sudan? The Chinese and the Russians are watching to see how he responds. They will respond accordingly. Others are looking. Can they still depend on the United States? But I had so much fun in my career. I think the most important micro thing I remember is when I was in the Philippines and 4,000 women were dying each year from bleeding in the uterus after giving birth. And we were able to, through USAID and an American pharmaceutical company, provide those shots to women to prevent those deaths. We're very proud of that. Human trafficking, the more you peel back the onion, the worse it gets. But we take the lead in trying to combat human trafficking. It's a terrible scourge that exists all through the world, including in the United States, in horrific ways. LGBTQIA rights. I could fly, at least when I was working, I could fly the rainbow flag above the embassy in my residence. Easy now to do marches in some countries in support, but in Zimbabwe, that is impossible. So you have to find ways to give people space to support LGBTQIA rights. Religious freedom. In Bangladesh, there were people, Muslims, who were from different sects that the majority Islamic sects did not want to associate with, and in fact wanted to do harm. And the assistant secretary and I were able to go to one of the houses and stop them from having harm. You can do all of these type things without much oversight from Washington. Now, if you were in the Ukraine the last few years, the good thing about being in Ukraine, you have a lot of attention from Washington. The bad thing is you have a lot of attention from Washington. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. In our embassies, for example, in the Philippines, not only do we have the sections of the State Department that I talked about in USAID, but we have Peace Corps, we have IRS, we have Secret Service, we have FBI, drug enforcement. We had over 30 agencies. We had to deal with kidnappings. We have military attaches. We had special forces and special operating forces training the Filipinos in special forces tactics to combat terrorists. We had Federal Transit Authority helping Filipinos keep the skies safe. We negotiate landing rights. All of these things. So what is a daily day in an embassy? Is like Vlad said, I have no daily day. It goes from very early in the morning to late at night. And often we do go to receptions, but those are work. When you have to go to reception, trust me. So in conclusion, I can say the fun I had was being on stage with Adam Levine, talking about human trafficking. Being on stage with the Black Eyed Peas, talking about education. Having Katy Perry in the back of my car in her underwear, but that's for another day. True story. Having lunch with the Dalai Lama. But on a serious note, I worked at the White House under Dr. Rice. I was there on 9/11, the native of New York. I'll never forget that day. At the same time, we are 20 years into the war in Afghanistan, and I was the director for South Asia at the National Security Council after that. When Dr. Rice interviewed me to work there, she asked me, what should we do about—
I'm sorry, you have just muted yourself.
I said, Dr. Rice interviewed me. She asked me, what should we do about Afghanistan? This was in the spring of 2001. And I said, we need to stay away from it because every country that's gotten in there has gotten burned. And if you know Dr. Rice, she's very calm, very, very calm. But she almost jumped out of her chair and said, right. And Steve Hadley, who followed her, was the other person interviewing me. They said, yes, we never had any intention of going in there. But once we got in there, we forgot. I forgot also what I told Dr. Rice, and stay away. We all got swept up in thinking we could make Afghanistan into America, and we could not. And now President Biden is faced with a May 1st decision of taking 2,500 troops out, finding a peace agreement with the Taliban, of backing President Ghani. And this is a very difficult decision. I don't know what he'll do, but it's April 25th, March 25th. Hard to get 25 troops and sensitive equipment out by May 1st. So perhaps he will not be able to, and our forever war will continue. But these are the kind of things. So never forget your history. History repeats itself. Find a way not to get caught up, even if that's the way of the crowd. And understand, as I said, I thought I really understood the Philippines until I married a Filipina and I realized how little I knew. So those things will always be part of what you do in any diplomatic corps, but especially our diplomatic corps. And for the Americans on the call, I encourage you to apply in the fall for internships. I encourage you to apply for Wrangell Pickering Fellowships or Payne Fellowship if you'd like to work with USAID. In exchange for 5 years working with us, we give you a master's degree. We have some at Yale Jackson, currently of our scholarship students. So look forward to either seeing you in the American Diplomatic Corps or one of your diplomatic